Уважаемые коллеги, просим вас занимать свои места. Наша сессия начинается. We'll start.
Dear colleagues, friends, guests of HEC, we are happy to welcome you to the annual Eurasian International Academic Conference on Economic and Social Development issue. Today's session is EAEU in the new global context, opportunities for the greater Eurasian partnership, which is dedicated to Russia's chairmanship in EAEU. The most fundamental challenge currently facing Eurasian economic integration under EAEU and its institution is that the Union was formed as an instrument to enhance the international competitiveness in its member states with the reliance on the key institutions and rules of the global order. And now we're observing that the basic conditions for international economic cooperation are changing. On the one hand, the global economy remaining interconnected, it is becoming at the same time more regionally or macro-regionally dimensions. We observe new centers of gravity that are emerging, turbulence. At the same time, there's still a tendency for new centers of gravity for international trade, investment partnerships, and there's more focus on bilateral trade. There was a plenary session on BRICS during this conference. And what was discussed, the framework agreement and BRICS and promoting trade. EAEU will be promoting multilateral trend. The need for that is greater now. Finance, trade, institutional and logistic opportunities are important and ties within the Union and Greater Eurasia. And whereas in the past, cooperation between member countries was seen as additional opportunity and possibility, now it's a necessity.
So we would need to unite in order to stand against any trends in the world economy that are negative. And in this sense, the concept of building a major, greater Eurasian partnership is something that is taking on an additional lease on life. And today we will be assessing the global changes that are happening and how the EAEU will be growing. I will ask the speakers to stick to the time limit of 5 minutes so that in the end we would have the opportunity to have a discussion both with those present here in the room and those who have joined us online. This is being streamed and we want everyone to be able to say a few words. And now I would like to give the floor to the first speaker, Dmitry Volvach, Deputy Head of the Minister for Economic Development of Russia, who is in charge of coordinating Russia's efforts in foreign economic cooperation area, especially concerning CIS and the Eurasian Economic Union, dear Victoria, dear colleagues, dear friends, I would like to ask the organizers of the forum and our colleagues from the Higher School of Economics for their excellent organization of this really large-scale event, for the opportunity to take part in it and discuss relevant issues of integration across the greater Eurasia. The Eurasian International Academic Conference on the Development of Social and Economic Development is probably one of the most preeminent conferences in this area. And this is reflected in the deep dialogue and the foresight assessment of the events that are taking place. Hopefully today we're going to be able to take stock of what has been done so far in developing the Eurasian Economic Union and discuss the key achievements of the Eurasian integration, and also think about the challenges and opportunities that exist. This is especially relevant now as the world architecture is changing, and we are about to launch the new cycle of planning for the Eurasian Economic Union. Today we can observe as countries that participate in various formats are expanding their multilateral and bilateral cooperation by creating new growth points and developing their logistics routes and supply chains. The events of 2022, the past year, have shown the true attitude of the Western world towards not just Russia but our key trading partners. We can see that the West's goal is to undermine our joint efforts aimed at improving the living standards of our citizens and destroy everything that we have been creating for decades together with our friends to stop us from implementing our projects in the future. This emphasizes yet again how we need to speed up our cooperation in all areas and strengthen our integration processes as part of the efforts of the Eurasian Economic Union, the Commonwealth of Independent States, SCR and BRICS. As we expand our cooperation with our partners, we view it as a priority for the Russian Federation and the focus of our efforts. We believe that the well-being of our states will be possible if these integration processes continue. The unprecedented anti-Russian sanctions imposed on us by the West have not resulted in the effects that they had expected to see, and the opposite is true. It has stimulated the development of Russia and its partners. We have modernized our financial system, and we have started to substitute our imports, and that shows our deepening interest in integration. A few numbers. The GDP of the Union in 2022 dropped by 1.6% last year compared to 2021. That was very successful, which is much better than the forecast that we have seen in April and March of last year and in October of last year. Primarily the forecasts of the IMF and the World Bank. Now these forecasts have been adjusted for more optimistic ones, primarily because the reality turned out to be very different. Some countries of the Eurasian Economic Union have shown really explosive growth of their economies. The GDP in real terms in Armenia grew by 12.6%. In Kazakhstan it was 3.2%. In Kyrgyzstan it was 7%. And Belarus and in Russia the real GDP shrank expectedly, but not by as far as it was expected by those who imposed the sanctions. In December of 2022, year on year, manufacturing in the Eurasian Economic Union stayed at the level of the previous year. The decline of industrial production was only shown in Belarus and a little bit in Russia, but in Armenia, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan we have observed growth, and in many cases it was quite significant. Agricultural production in EAEU has grown by 11.4%. compared with the 2021. And this growth was predicated on the growth of agricultural production in Kazakhstan and Russia by 9 and 10% respectively. In Armenia, agricultural production grew by 1.6%, and in Belarus it grew by 3.6%, and in Kyrgyzstan it was growing by 7.2% by the end of October 2022. Unemployment and employment services of all agencies recorded 824,000 unemployed, a minor percentage of all citizens, of all people living in these countries, and 19% lower than in 2021. That shows that one of the key principles of Eurasian Economic Union that calls for the need to move capitals allows everyone to find their place in the economy and ensure that they have employment across the entire Union. The foundation of this development and integration and stability of our economies is trade. In 2014-2021, mutual trade of all members of the EAEU grew in monetary terms by 28.5% and amounted to $73.1 billion in 2021. In 2022, the growth continued quite significantly. In monetary terms, regional trade exports was at 83.3 billion, which is 14% higher than in 2021. The highest growth was recorded for Armenia's exports to the EAEU markets by twofold, 0.8. From Belarus, the growth was 38%. From Kyrgyzstan, it was a twofold growth. Last year, our trade with external partners was also growing, and we have pivoted our logistics routes to those areas, and that was happening in 2021. It continues to happen. According to the Customs Service data in 2022, Russia's trade with China, compared with the previous year, grew by 28%, and with Turkey it grew by 84%, and with Germany the trade volume grew by 23%, which was expected. External trade of the members of the EAEU grew by 9% in total to $923 billion in dollar terms. The Eurasian Economic Union is responding to the changes in the world economy and to the challenges that arise before us. The Eurasian Five took measures to ensure stability, and that became the foundation of our work last year. The Council of the Eurasian Economic Commission issued assignments, and they were agreed upon on the 17th of March of 2022. More than 60 different acts of the Union were adopted last year to support the well-being of the citizens of the members of the Union and to ensure that our competitiveness remains stable and grows. This number, 60 acts of the Union, is a testament of the cohesion that our Union is showing under these circumstances, and all of the decisions are taken unanimously. They have to be taken unanimously, and that means that all the countries have learned to find all of such solutions that are beneficial to all of the parties concerned. These measures have allowed us to ensure that we can settle contracts using national currencies in a safe infrastructure, but also provide support to the consumers. We have taken some measures to support cooperation and import substitution. The measures that we have taken have provided positive impact on the existence of our economies in these difficult times. This is the result of a concerted effort of all of the governments of the members of the EAEU and of the Commission of the Eurasian Economic Union. Under these difficult conditions, the EAEU has shown that it is a mature and stable organization and an effective tool for economic development and for improving the well-being of the members of the EAEU and its citizens. Today, the EAEU is number 2 union like this worldwide in terms of the integration of its economic cooperations. As the national economies are growing and the well-being of the members are growing, this is the natural sequence and segue to the intensification of the quality of the integration processes on the Eurasian economic space. This integration allows us to rely on the competitive advantages of each other and seek for solutions to difficult problems of economic development. Today's discussion is obviously relevant and timely. It is a great opportunity to discuss further integration of our economies and our installation into the global architecture. As you know, on the 1st of October, Russia became the chair of this year. It will become the chair of all of the bodies of the EU. And Vladimir Putin, in his address to the authorities of the Union, has identified key initiatives that will drive the development of the EAEU. That includes measures to develop the EAEU further, that will identify what are going to be the focus areas until 2030 and 2045. As the uncertainty is still around us, we need to understand what is going to be the future of this Union, and one of the strategies is to ensure that we are technologically sovereign in key industries, and there is a great potential for expanding our cooperation. We need to take into account some end-to-end focus areas that would build the image of the Union, including the digital transformation, climate change, where we have a lot of potential for profound cooperation and involvement, including a voluntary market for carbon units and a bank for such technologies, logistics, the development of the north-south and east-west corridors for transportation, plus other logistics projects. All of these measures and areas create the foundation for the development of economic relations across the Eurasian continent. The Union is open to other countries and other integrative unions, and its cooperation with third countries will continue. It will be unlocking the potential of the EU as the core of the major Eurasian partnership, and it will be supporting the development of trade with our key economic partners. This pool of trade agreements, including Vietnam, Iran, Singapore, Serbia, and non-preferential trade agreement with China, will continue to expand. We are in the process of negotiating on creating free trade zones with Egypt, Indonesia, India, United Arab Emirates. We want to move to a free trade zone with Iran, and we'll do this in the very near future. In parallel with that, we are developing our dialogue with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with the Association of the Southeast Asia States. We are developing the EAEU's cooperation with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Last year, the share of the organization in the overall trade was more than 31%, and we have a lot of plans for the implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding between the Eurasian Economic Cooperation and with the Secretariat of the SCO, which is going to be signed in May of this year. We work with ASEAN countries. The share in its trade with UAE is not high, but the future is bright. Last year and in the previous year, the Ministry for Economic Development, together with the Eurasian Economic Union, approved the development of the program of cooperation with ASEAN until 2028, and this will allow us to exchange our experience and create conditions for improving the business climate. The EAEU, as the core of a major Eurasian partnership, will take steps that will ensure that we are flexible in including different countries and unions in its work. That includes bilateral and multilateral memoranda, agreements on free trade zones, and a deeper integration that will provide countries the status of observers within the EU. Plus, we are open to expanding the extent of the membership of the EU. There are certain procedures that can be implemented if there is such intention by any country that wants to join us. In summary, I would like to say that Russia has always been proactive in global and regional development, and the idea of developing major and greater Eurasian partnership was also put forward by Vladimir Putin, President of Russia, some time ago, and it is something that is already taking shape, being supported by legal developments, and the major foundation of this partnership will be the SCO and ASEAN and Eurasian Economic Union. And this is very important in today's turbulent times. We are showing a lot of interest to multilateral organizations of all of the greater Eurasian organizations, but we also want to intensify their activities and open new windows of opportunity, looking for ways to unite and multiply their potential. Members of the Union have prepared several packages that, once joined by others, will allow us to harmonize exchange of trade, information exchange as part of a unified information system of the EAEU. And we would also establish navigation TIDs and other measures that will ensure better logistics. And we want to expand this to a greater number of the key partners of the Eurasian Economic Union. We see the Greater Eurasian Partnership as a forum for consolidating the economic potential of all interested parties, where huge and vast spaces of Eurasia could be used as part of a common logistics and transportation system and network that would reduce and remove any restrictions that exist in logistics. We need to synchronize various integration processes, and that will serve as the foundation that could be used to build a new architecture within Eurasia. It is important to develop cooperation in such areas that could be of interest to all of the parties within the unions, including transportation, logistics, energy, banking and investment cooperation, as well as the information and telecommunications field. The major Eurasian partnership is something that is based on a balance of interests, which is to the benefit of all peoples living on the Eurasian continent. Only with that we will be able to withstand external challenges and crises and ensure that our economies develop. Thank you very much for the attention and for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
За очень содержательное выступление. Действительно, абсолютно, я думаю, каждый из нас может подписаться под тем, что только вместе мы сможем преодолеть и все кризисные тенденции и, опять же, выйти вперед на развитие взаимовыгодное, потому что здесь ключевое то, что мы, опять же, говорим о сотрудничестве и дружбе не против кого-то, несмотря на то, что какие-то отдельные...
We are talking about friendship and cooperation not against someone. We are talking about interaction and cooperation for mutual benefit. And the Greater Eurasian Partnership is about this. And the Eurasian Economic Union. And let me give the floor to Marat Berdiev, who is Ambassador at Large for the Greater Eurasian Partnership of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, who could tell us about the major trends of development. And you are Russian sous-sherpa to G20, and so you know firsthand about the dynamic and discussion there. It's only together that we can move forward. Thank you. You have the floor. Thank you, Victoria. It's for the first time that I speak as Ambassador at Large, who deals with Greater Eurasian Partnership, among other things. And it's a pleasure that I am speaking at HSC, a flagship university in Russia that is pursuing this matters, geopolitical factors, economic turbulence that continue, unfortunately, in world economy for a number of years, and quite often not only due to failures in economic policies, but growing confrontation internationally. And in this respect, the Greater Eurasian Partnership is the initiative Russia came up with in 2015 is topical significance and importance. We've just heard substantive analysis of the importance of integration processes and what has been accomplished so far by Russia and its partners in the heart of the continent by creating, 2015, same year, over an advanced and demanded for required integration format Eurasian Economic Union, which during these years have accumulated rich experience, achieved so much in development of the economies of the countries which are members of the Union, and having partners outside of the Union. Besides in-depth integrational connectedness, the Union has 190 consumers, has qualified workforce, developed markets, which are being harmonized, creating effective impulses for developing a key continent, Eurasia, bringing together such giants as India, Russia, China, Indonesia, which together may contribute to resolution of many global issues, maintaining sustainable economic growth, meeting SDGs, improving living standards. It's a wide and positive integrative agenda following the best traditions pursued for many years by Russia, creating a barrier-free environment across the continent with active use, this motto of from Lisbon to Vladivostok, from ocean to ocean. But the gist of what Russia is proposing it continues to be the same: maximum development of ties based on market-based economy, free competition, and meeting the needs of our respective societies and people. We will base this activity based on the experience accumulated in the Union as a stimulating core for greater Eurasian partnership to impart serious impetus to projects, initiatives, unions, alliances, and national economies to resolve the issues facing us on a mutually beneficial basis. The initiative has been come from the President of the Russian Federation and is in resonance with leaders of other countries, friendly partners, India. I'm also dealing with G20, and the Indian chairmanship agenda is close to our goals, to greater Eurasian partnership, creating a world system that will be multipolar, and that would meet the three-pronged task: the unity of the planet, of our future, and we are supporting this Indian chairmanship's agenda and creating a basis for further development of cooperation between the countries. The list of initiatives has several key components. Number one is they're comprehensive. There are several projects underway, initiatives, which are either territorially limited or specialized, like infrastructure development, harmonization of various components of macroeconomic policies. EAEU is universal in nature. Its aim is to create regionally such a design of Eurasian economy that would work based on common rules, would meet the interests of all member countries, would allow them to take part in specific processes of the greater Eurasian partnership based on national interests, and as was said by the first speaker, the open, transparent nature of relations within the Union, with an open dialogue within the Greater Eurasian Partnership, and we'll be aiming at not duplicating other initiatives and other processes and effort in parallel, which would allow countries to take part in the work planned based on variable tracks and speed for further conjugation of the economies during Greater Eurasian Partnership. We formed a mechanism for implementation of this initiative, solicited support of major players, and recorded readiness of a number of countries to take part in the Russian initiative on Greater Eurasian Partnership. This was confirmed in intergovernmental documents, statements of national leaders. There are entities formed, Russia-China Commission on conjugation of Greater Eurasian Partnership and One Belt, One Road initiatives. We have agreements between the Eurasian Economic Union and partners from Asia. A free trade zone between these associations and other prospective members and partners that can be mutually stimulating. And today, in current situation, Greater Eurasian Partnership acquires special added value. We see the process of globalization now not working in full. We see fragmentation of the global economy into regional blocks. Unfortunately, it's a situation we need to face and deal with that affects on the global economic system, inflation rate, rupture of supply chains, logistical issues, and decline in productivity, which are long-term challenges. And the Greater Eurasian Partnership could seriously transform this situation by setting 3 untapped reserves not yet used on the Eurasian continent. Unfortunately, we are observing the rise of sanctions-based policy because of the changes in balance of power in the world economy. And players need to be adapted to this new international dialogue, which is going to happen, I hope. And this will be assisted by building productive economies based on BRICS, based on Shanghai SCO, and Eurasian Economic Union, which can create prerequisites for its full functioning. For us, the Greater Eurasian Partnership continues to be a key initiative. On the 31st of March, we updated the concept of foreign policy of Russia, and Greater Eurasian Partnership is called a flagship project in this concept, and we are giving much attention to this. And in the near future, Russia will come out with new initiatives to give additional impetus to our advancing in this important area. The Foreign Office of Russia, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, with other agencies, is now working on updating the concept for Greater Eurasian Partnership, and in addition, there will be an economic strategy developed, sectoral plans and projects to fill with additional substance this important effort. Hopefully I did not exceed the time limit. So my intent was to give some picture of the implementation of this Greater Eurasian Partnership initiative. We'll be happy to respond to questions, if any. Thank you very much. A very substantive contribution, and the structure and design should be helped by various methods and ways. Should be based on the foundation of humanitarian cooperation, educational interaction and development. Now I would like to give the floor Pavel Shevtsov from Federal Agency for the International Humanitarian Cooperation, Россотрудничество, who knows firsthand how players interact in humanitarian sphere. We had a round table on discussing a single educational space. It's a topical task. Without a harmonized approach, that would be difficult to interact on youth programs, educational programs. If you could share your vision as Россотрудничество and other hats that you wear. Thank you for being given the floor. I would like to thank the organizers of this conference. Quite often we get together in various formats, and now we are discussing the greater Eurasian space and partnership. The idea of globalization and its process is coming to an end, and we see it's being fragmented into macroeconomical political zones. This may not necessarily be a bad thing. In some specific areas, it will also have some pluses, benefits. And when I worked in 2014 and 15 in the Ministry for Economic Development, I witnessed the inception of the idea of Eurasian Economic Union. And there were long debates and discussions on what this single market should look like, and the time frame for organizing currency policies and other. And during those years, the idea of Eurasian space development has acquired greater significance and impetus. From the perspective of Россотрудничество, Agency for International Humanitarian Cooperation, humanitarian development is also important. And if we talk about the single educational space that you mentioned, Victoria, this space, with other perspectives and approaches, harmonizes our societies, creating common values. The history of humanity shows only in alliance with other countries that through alliances civilization can continue and prosper. Now that we see ruptured relations with Western Europe, North America in terms of educational or technological cooperation, the creation of a single educational space for the greater Eurasia is a key goal, and I think it is at such conferences experts raise awareness of and understanding of what Eurasian space is about and what a single educational space when people may speak about your single educational space, but when I ask people, what is it about? And member countries have different perspectives and understanding. And Russia and other countries may have different perspectives. If you look at the greater Eurasian, like China and other countries may have different priorities and goals. And attempting to bring this all together is a challenging task for the near future. Now we are facing a situation whereas several years ago we were saying, let's try and do it. Now we say we must do it quickly. And the priorities we are facing will make us work fast. It affects science, technology. A lot of technological development was tied with our cooperation with Western Europe, with North America. Now it is destroyed, and not to lose pace and speed, we need to rebuild the spheres to reorient with our partners, the work with our partners. We'll need to share for Greater Eurasia. There are many events, including HSC conference. Recently I visited Vietnam. We show what we can, see what our partners can provide, and come up with some joint products that could be taken to market. A year ago, a decade of science and technology was declared in the Russian Federation, which is a serious incentive. And there is a serious aspect of international cooperation with regard to inter-university cooperation. I see.
Не все просто здесь, конечно, происходит.
Certainly, not everything is rosy because we have different system of accounting, and that all leads to the need to harmonize all of this, and this requires a lot of work to be done by the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Science, and of course the university community should have a role in this, so that we will understand properly the purpose of this education. And another important area is language policies. We want more people across the Greater Eurasia to speak Russian, because this is a matter of communicating properly. The more people know the languages, our language, and the more Russians know the languages of the Greater Eurasian countries, the better off we'll be. And that's why we are making these decisions. Speaking about science and technology, it is very important to pursue a proper youth policy, and that's where we had a lot of programs. And people come to us and they study our experience, and we have this new generation program. We would bring people to participate in various major forums, the St. Petersburg Economic Forum and the Eastern Economic Forum. And we take these individuals, the young students, to events that further their education, the young scientists, the future diplomats, the ones that will be shaping the horizontal networks to preserve their contacts, and will be the center of gravity for their interactions. And of course, culture is of vital importance here. Well, we have better rich Russian culture, CIS countries, Middle East, and other countries, South Asia, India, that they have a lot to show for their culture, and that brings us all together, make us better understood by each other, and that gives us the motivation to study the language and to go to school and to study various classes in Russian, not just necessarily in CIS countries. So this is a very important area. I could speak about this for hours, but since there's a very limited time scope that I have been allotted, so as we bring such experts fora together through discussions, through hearing each other, through hearing what our colleagues from other countries have to say, we better understand where we need to move forward. What should be the nuances of our mutual development we need to focus on to avoid major mistakes and to be more friendly with each other. Thank you very much. It was a very right focus of our attention, and everyone I know support these ideas. Thank you very much. And indeed, you mentioned in the very beginning, Pavel, and Mr. Valdich and Dmitry spoke about this, we have moved from a more theoretical construct to something more hands down, something more hands-on, practical. It's time for us to speak about what needs to be done. We have a list of tools, opportunities for the practical implementation of our cooperation in the field of national economy, in the humanitarian field, and at the level of intergovernmental links, and every university, including the HEC, that is opening lyceum classes within the EAEU, but also outside it. It's not just a matter of teaching people the Russian language, but also to ensure that more and more people are involved in STEM education, in engineering and math, and Russia has been quite strong in that, and we are willing to prep future students to enroll in universities and to succeed there. That's what predicates our cooperation, and the position of the High School of Economics is quite well known worldwide. Thank you very much. And our world is, it has been said, is global. But although people say it's coming to an end, it's more fragmented into micro-regions and into regions, but nevertheless, the United Nations organization is the cornerstone, not just of strategic stability, but as a forum for negotiating, although countries not always find common language, but it's still a forum, but to also see it as a major experts platform that can offer consensus and very professional outlooks for further development. That is why we would like to give the floor to Mr. Hamzi Ali Malik, Director of the Macroeconomic Policy and Financing for Developmental Department at UNESCAP, who is deeply involved in SDG issues, finance of climate change activities, anti-tax evasion, economic recovery after COVID-19 and the crises that emerge. So it is interesting to see how the greater Eurasian partnership could fit into this more global context, so that we can have a win-win situation. We'd like to hear it's about from you, Ms. Malik. The floor is yours.
I also express my gratitude to the organizers of this conference and for inviting me and coming here to Moscow for the first time and share my perspectives on the subject here. I had prepared some slides, but in the interest of time, I won't be going through them one by one. Rather, I'll keep them as a backdrop and I'll make simple points on two aspects. One, I'd like to highlight the key changing macroeconomic conditions. I'll highlight 4 points in that, and then zeroing in on, as previous speakers also said, the fragmentation of globalization and processes and how EAEU can actually support moving the agenda forward. I'll focus on reforming international financial architecture. So 4 key points I want to show is, so you can have a visual if you want to look at the slides. Number one, the GDP growth, and these are the numbers primarily from Asia-Pacific region. As the chief economist of Asia, I'll focus only on the Asia-Pacific numbers here. So GDP growth has drastically declined in the last few years and is unlikely to go back to its pre-COVID levels. Specifically, it has come down from 7.3% in 2021 to less than half, to about 3.3%. So that's number one, which has many implications for the employment opportunities, the ability of governments to reduce poverty. It has an effect on government's tax revenues, in turn adversely affecting their ability to support their businesses and firms and so on and so forth. Number two, inflation is on the rise significantly in the region. Oops, that's not my slides. Oops. This is some other slides. Anyways, I was not going to use them anyways. So, number 2 point is inflation is significantly on the rise, going from about 3.4% on average to 7.6% in the region. And it has been going up since mid-2021, not just in the aftermath of the Russian-Ukraine conflict, as most commentators tend to say. So higher inflation, of course, has implications for the monetary policy positions, and that's my third point. Interest rates have been increasing gradually still not there. Interest rates have been increasing across the globe, partly because of domestic inflationary pressures and partly because the advanced economies like US Fed has actually increased interest rates quite drastically, leaving relatively little room for developing countries to respond. If they don't increase interest rates, they are likely to experience capital outflow from their regions, financial instability, and so on and so forth. So in a way, they are prompted to increase interest rates. That's one example of the weaknesses in the international economic system at the moment. Fourth point is the fiscal positions have deteriorated considerably. So fiscal deficits on average, for instance, in the Asia-Pacific region had gone up from about 1% on average to a little over 5%. And debt GDP ratio levels on average are at an 18-year high, moving from about 41% on average in the region to about 49%. So these four broad areas, low growth, high inflation, rising interest rates, and difficult fiscal positions and rising debt levels, essentially are creating macroeconomic conditions which are putting pressure on the international economic system to respond. However, the international economic system is actually weak, and I like to call it, it's a non-system. So the governments who need support, countries who need support from the international system to get them out of these issues, rising debt for instance, there are no avenues that are available. So I want to leave you with 5 broad areas, and I'll stop here actually, and then we can discuss further if needed. There are 5 areas that United Nations is pushing at the global level to reform what we call international financial architecture. Loosely speaking, what the international architecture simply means is the existing set of international financial frameworks, rules, institutions, and markets that have evolved since World War II gradually as different phases of economic globalization unfolded, often in ad hoc fashion and in response to various economic and financial shocks. So that's a loose definition of international financial architecture. Just to give you a sense of the institutions that are involved, there are international public finance institutions like the World Bank, ADB, Asian Development Bank, and many multilateral development banks. There are many public development banks, especially in China, which are enormous, which are investing across China through a Belt and Road Initiative, for instance. There are global funds like Global Climate Fund, and so on and so forth. Similarly, there are global monetary institutions, International Monetary Fund is one example. There are regional financing arrangements, for instance, CMIM of ASEAN economies, that is there. Then there are financial regulators, norm setters globally, like FSB, Financial Stability Board, BIS, FATF, and so on and so forth. United Nations, of course, is there in many areas of economic and development. And there are other loose international groupings such as G20 and G7, the Paris Club, which deal with debt issues. You have International Capital Market Association setting norms for financial market regulators to attract climate finance, for instance, and so on and so forth. So I'm just giving you a flavor of what exactly do I mean when I refer to the term international financial architecture. So there are 5 areas where UN is pushing reforms and where I think EAEU actually, with an ambition, as I heard today, and in the concept note, pursuing greater Eurasian partnerships can play a significant role in pushing for these reforms. 1, reforming global economic governance. It's a non-representative system dominated by few countries, primarily by US and Europe, and many developing countries are not adequately represented. This is one key area of concern, and we want to address that. Number 2, address debt challenges. There is no global unified platform where countries can get help in terms of getting their debt distress resolved or debt restructuring underway. It's always a bilateral kind of arrangement between the major creditors and with the engagement of institutions like IMF, which has, for instance, representational issues. So developing countries' interests are not truly represented. Number 3, there's the need to reshape multilateral financing mechanisms to support global public goods, for instance, climate change. So institutions like World Bank are not channeling sufficient financing to developing countries in areas where there is needed the most. And there are significant avenues how you can do that. Number 4, strengthen the global financial safety net, which is weak and again very piecemeal. And last, we need to reset rules for the financial system now so it can have sustainability over time. The moment there are macroeconomic challenges like rising interest rates or debt, you see financial institutions collapsing. We saw that in 2008. We have some concerns now what is happening in the US. So the global financial system actually is fairly unstable. So these are the 5 broad areas I wanted to put forward here to the audience as suggested areas where EAEU can actually engage in these issues, push for reforms so that we can have a much better global multilateral economic cooperation framework. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be happy to discuss all these issues in detail, but let's leave it for later part. Thank you.
Спасибо, господин Малик. Действительно очень важно, и спасибо за то, что...
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. It was very important, and thank you once again for showing us the shortcomings that exist in financial institutions. And therefore, it is very important for us to work together on dealing with these issues as part of the greater European partnership, among other things, and together with our colleagues with the United Nations to overcome these shortcomings that do feel additional pressure from the so-called gold billion without letting other players to take advantage of all of the goods that should have been accessible to all of them through an international financial system. Once again, thank you for your presentation. And now, please allow me to give the floor to Doctor of Political Science, Mr. Bordachov, who is the Doctor of Political Sciences, Scientific Director of the Center for Comprehensive European and International Studies at the National Research University High School of Economics. He has published a lot of books on Eurasian integration. He is a recognized and preeminent expert, not just in our country, but also internationally. And people listen to him. He's also the program director of the Valda International Discussion Club. And one of the influencers on the in the public space, in the public realm, not just in the Russian Federation. Mr. Bordachov, you have the floor.
Thank you for the introduction to my presentation. I have nothing else to do but to join in and subscribe to what has been said to the previous speakers. I must subscribe to what has been said. We see this Eurasian integration for quite some time and in a position to make some conclusion. And the experience is overall positive. The events of 2022 show that Eurasian economic integration has worked, and those institutions and practices that emerged within it were capable of meeting the issues that Russia and other countries have faced in the midst of the war West is carrying out against the Russian Federation. Now we are at a new stage. Shaping the core of what is called the Greater Eurasian Partnership. 6 themes I would like to note that, in my view, will inevitably face. The first theme was in the previous speakers' presentations: interaction between globalization and regionalization. And it is globalization in the second half of the 20th century that led to this attempts to isolate Russia. It shows that globalization and free market economy are working at the same time. We know that our Chinese friends don't want destruction of globalization, and they understand without reason, not without basis, there can be 2 developments based on open economy or development based on sponsors' wishes. Russia and China seem to be choosing developing that based on openness. During the past year, Russia's policy has done nothing to destroy this openness or economic ties. At the same time, our former Western partners have been focusing on the split of the world, on creation of separate regions, a new bipolar confrontation. This rhetoric of split and unraveling, it is there in the US narrative. And we in Russia should be cautious. And respect on the part of our partners, China and India, for instance, will very much depend upon our capacity to develop our own vision, not necessarily related to what is being said by our former partners in the West. The second thing we'll be facing, development of small and medium-sized countries, states. Until recently, in Eurasia, such countries were building their plans for development based on integration. They were oriented to this. They were interacting with Russia, China, with Eurasian Economic Union, but our neighbors tied and connected their future with the system which the United States were built and now are destroying. And now the question is to what extent what we can offer in terms of alternative that we can offer to our small and medium-sized partners, not through the World Bank, not through Western-controlled international organization, but through Greater Eurasian Partnership entities, the forms that we are observing. The forms are practiced by small states. They're transient, they're not stable. And the third theme, regional security. the fact of life, all except Russia and China see security in Eurasia as a question of diplomacy, but not as the question of their development or survival. It's only for Russia and China and partially for India. Security in Asia is a major security issue. For US and Europe, security in Asia is a question of interaction with Russia and China. We should be ready for our former Western partners to switch on all the mechanisms to encourage Central Asian and other countries to promote their view. And Russia and China should do something about it, because otherwise we'll have to use other sort of measures like military measures. The Eurasian Economic Union has shown also that institutions are able to work on an equal basis, not necessarily when there was someone above controlling everybody and telling everybody what to be done. I'm not a government official. It may work, sometimes it doesn't, but overall it is working on this equal basis. That's a purely positive fact. Therefore, for us to deal with this, Russia and China, India should learn how to take into account the interest of small and medium-sized countries as partners in foreign policy, public diplomacy, to reduce the urge or intent or necessity for small and medium-sized countries to go to and apply to Western partners. Today we know in the world there are two visions of the future, US and Chinese. Either US hegemony led, can Russia come up with a fundamentally different vision of the future? Which seemed to me is an important political issue. Thank you very much. Thank you. These are important questions.
Thank you very much. You've just raised a lot of important issues, and maybe the respective agencies will give it a thought, and hopefully we'll have some time for a discussion outside maybe the scope of this session. And now I would like to give the floor to someone who's joining us online, Mr. Kiyoshi Yamada, who had until recently for 10 years been a rector of the Tokai University and a member of the board of trustees of the Tokai University educational system. This is a manifestation of what Mr. Bardachov was saying, that all of the efforts to isolate Russia in all areas, including economic area, of course, have failed. And Professor Yamada is a consistent follower and proponent of humanitarian interaction between Russia and Japan, between Eurasia and all countries that are connected by Eurasia. Mr. Yamada, we are really happy to see you. You are our longtime and dear friend. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yamada. It has been a pleasure to hear your presentation. Want to note Professor Anisimov, our rector, is an honorary professor of Tokai University. And Dr. Yamada is honorary doctor of law. And this helped strengthen relations between our two universities. And thank you very much again that despite the headwinds and storms, you continue with this important endeavor of maintaining interaction between our universities and with Eurasian Economic Union and post-Soviet space. It's important for college students to exchange, to have mobility. Yeah, you see that there are no bears walking at the university. Let's go back to this room. Thank you. Let me give the floor to Nelson Wong, Vice Chairman of Shanghai Center for Impact, and also a member of the Hallback Discussion Club. And he has a lot to say about reformatting the vision of the future and the image of the future that Dr. Bardachev was speaking about. Your vision, where we're heading in conjugation with greater Eurasian partnership and one road, one belt, and how in current situations we can use available tools and offer new tools enabling our countries and our partners in the Eurasian space to stably and sustainably develop and gain social and economic benefits. Thank you.
Very good morning to you all. It's a pleasure and honor to be invited by the HSE University to speak at this 24th Eurasian International Academic Conference on Economic and Social Development. So sitting on this important panel and listening to the impressive talks of the honorable ministers of the Russian Federation and the distinguished scholars is more than just an intellectual pleasure. They are educating, thought-provoking, and enlightening. This is already my fourth trip to Russia and second time in Moscow. And I'm very grateful to the events organizing committee for their excellent work to have made my trip this time yet another exciting and pleasant experience. The most recent China-Russia joint declaration signed by the leaders of our two countries confirms, among other things, that China supports Russia's drive to further advance the Eurasian Economic Union integration process and its call for building the Greater Eurasian Partnership. And Russia also vows its support for China's Belt and Road Initiative. So both leaders have agreed that our two countries must work together and support each other to further promote and advance these initiatives that are not contradictory to one another and can develop in parallel for the benefit of all countries and peoples thus concerned. However, recent global changes do dictate that some serious strategic rethinking may be required in our endeavor to continue to promote these initiatives. This is why we're gathering here, and I believe why I have been invited to join the discussion. as an independent observer interested in the research and analysis of international affairs. It's coming from China and leading a private think tank with also a lifelong career as a business and investment consultant, I do keep an undying interest in finding new opportunities of all kinds in the forever changing world, and would therefore love to share with you my understanding and observations on the way China has been developing its economy, hoping that might provide some food for thought. I don't attempt to claim that what I'm going to say might provide a comprehensive solution to the big questions. Rather, by sharing my thoughts, I would hope to inspire further discussions and debates on the topic of why, instead of falling back on the forming of economic alliances with others, China has taken a more proactive approach by coming up with the Belt and Road Initiative and has been reasonably successful so far. I've heard people saying that China doesn't necessarily support the EAEU or the building of the greater Eurasian partnership. Others claim that because of its huge population and the size of its economy, China is already big enough and hence there is no need for the country to take a part in these endeavors. This is actually not true, because the world is constantly changing and the landscape of today's national economies may easily get changed over a few decades, if not years. Who would have thought 30 years ago that China has now become the second largest economy in the world? No country can afford to overlook any opportunity that might help boost up its economy and bring up the living standards of its people. As I've repeatedly pointed out on different occasions, we Chinese are traders by nature, and the entrepreneurial spirit of us Chinese dictates that we would welcome opportunities of all kinds that may offer a positive outcome, for mutual benefit, of course. The Belt and Road Initiative is a typical example to show how China seeks to expand its economy in a global context. Everything comes with a reason, and the same applies to the BRI. The announcement of the initiative 10 years ago came at a time when China's economy was developing into a bottleneck, with the country desperately in need to find new markets to keep capitalizing on its production capacity. From roads, railroads, bridges, airports, seaports, to shipbuilding, machine building, and design and production of all kinds of vehicles, phones, communication equipment, electric home appliances, and almost all kinds of fast-moving consumer goods, China has accumulated not only the know-how and experience to produce them, but also a huge production capacity that can help others to improve their infrastructure and provide what is needed. Along with the launching of the Belt and Road Initiative, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank was also established to offer funding solutions for countries that need to improve their infrastructure building, but may not have the financial capability or resources just yet. Because the concept is so simple and straightforward, it is easily understandable and therefore widely accepted. With now 151 countries and 32 international organizations having signed up some 200 documents with China to welcome this Belt and Road Initiative and endorse their cooperation and willingness to participate in more than 3,000 projects with a total investment of over $1 trillion. For that matter, Russia's call for building the greater Eurasian partnership is well echoed by China, because its aim and objective is to promote the betterment of the interconnectivity, which will be instrumental in enhancing economic development and cooperation of all countries across the region. whilst it is given that more business opportunities will be created with the advancement of the project, to ensure its successful implementation would definitely put our human wisdom to test. It will require such a good and careful planning ahead, which should not only take into account the actual economic development need of every country in question and how all of the effort to put in will be mutually beneficial to all participating members, but should also weigh on the growing geopolitical conflict and social and political realities of the countries thus concerned. In all fairness, China does have a lot to offer in terms of its experience in developing the country's national economy and lessons learned over the years of implementation of this Belt and Road Initiative. The exchanges can take place at both government levels and among the business communities of our two countries. However, it is important we realize that each country is unique in its own civilizational model, and that China's model and experience may in many ways be irrelevant to others. What is true is that we must first of all respect each other, because we all have come a long way to reach where we are now, and to recognize that we're different from one another due to our unique histories and diverse cultural heritages, and that it is exactly this diversity that has made our world colorful and interesting. But then our diversity can also translate into difference in our attitudes and opinions towards topics and issues of common concern. That's why talks, discussions, debates, and negotiations are always imperative in order for us to reach an understanding, a consensus, and sometimes a compromise. Business dealings do exist among countries, but building an economic partnership is a lot more complicated than that. The heydays of fast economic growth that many of us used to take for granted during the so-called globalization period are gone, along with the decision of the believed to be most powerful and developed country, the US, to turn back to the protectionist doctrine and start decoupling and disconnecting its economic ties with China, the biggest developing country of today. So once again, our world is entering into a period of uncertainty. Some may describe this as geopolitical reshuffling. Others may call it a conflict between democracies and autocracies. The hard fact is that the foundation of world peace is currently shaking, and the pillars supporting the global stage are trembling now that the major geopolitical parties have found it difficult to agree on how we're all supposed to move forward. Nonetheless, our leaders and their policy advisors are now expected to engage in much more active communications than ever in order to settle our disputes and differences and to agree upon a sensible framework to ensure the continued survival and development of our respective nations. What is also important for us to remember is that it is in our own interest, and the best interest actually, to always keep an open mind and learn to agree to disagree, to modify and adjust our objectives according to changing situations and environments, and to rationalize our approaches to tackle the challenges and even threats we're now facing and will be facing in the days to come, be it an individual, an entity, or a country. And when it comes to the promotion and implementation of a regional geopolitical and economic initiative, such as the Greater Eurasian Partnership and the Belt and Road Initiative, building up a shared vision to engage the commitment of all participants and to inspire more to join, and making an offer that cannot be refused will be the key to success. Equally true is that we must always have the passion, patience, and perseverance in order to achieve the common goal for greater good. Even if it means we have to convince and win over those who may still have doubts in us or consider themselves as our competitors or adversaries. So on this note, my dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have to say that we still have a long way to go and a lot more work to do together as true and trusted partners. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wong. So much work is in store for us as partners. In continuation, we have heard Indian, Russian colleagues. Much has been said about interaction with our partners and with other Eurasian countries, which are key actors as part of these new structures. With your permission, I will give the floor Mr. Rakimov, an expert on infrastructural development, Executive Director of Applicata, Center for Strategic Solutions, Public Foundation from Kyrgyzstan. He was an advisor to Prime Minister. He was one of the leaders of the Chamber of Commerce and Trade. He's had high positions in government. Now he's an expert function and position. If you could share with us this complex vision based on your mixed experience, given the kind of hats that you have had. Interesting for all of us. Take into account not only the interest of major countries, but small and medium-sized countries to have a full-fledged Eurasian Greater Partnership. Mr. Kubaket Rakimov.
I'm delighted to have been invited to this conference. Well, those who are at the end of the list of speakers find it very convenient because you start with a lot of bullet points, but as the discussions progress, you have less and less to add. So I would be very brief, and let me point out some of my observations. Number one, in Central Asia, there's an active discussion now about decolonization. Speaking about this post-colonial aspect, it is being raised by some non-governmental organizations. They conduct events of this kind almost every week, but the discourse is very anti-Russian because they are saying that Central Asia was a colony of Russia, that it was part of the Russian Empire and then of the Soviet Union, and they were there on unfair conditions. But the question is that subconsciously, when you see not, the particle not, you sometimes don't see it. And in that sense, the actions of the national governments in our region are based on decolonization, but not in the direction that some think is needed. Let me use the example of my country. We did a surgery of detaching our gold deposits from the Good Samaritans from Canada. As a result, we got the GDP growth of 7% right away, And once Kyrgyzstan got involved as a small country, got involved in the Eurasian Economic Union, we can say that our GDP would be growing at the rate of 10% in just a matter of 18 months to 24 months. So we were able to achieve the results in that span of time that some of the experts from the World Bank were saying that it would take us 7 or 8 years to achieve. And we did it in 1 year and a half. So the resource-based nationalism, in the good sense of the word, in combination with the proper involvement and engagement in economic alliances, because the role of small countries is important, nevertheless, as Mir Bordachov said. And as we meet our obligations within the Union, the Eurasian Economic Union, we have the basis to conclude that the resource-based nationalism is very important and a very important element in this struggle for the contours, the borders of the new economy of Eurasia, of the new Eurasia. That is important to understand. So the paradox is that we are being talked about decolonization, we are listening, but we're making steps in the right direction along those lines. It is very important to not be afraid of non-standard, out-of-the-box approaches. Professor Mikolov is also present here, and together with him, we've used Michel Foucault's approach to heterotopy, where it comes to space. How can we see through something illusory, how can we see reality through that illusion? We've seen the One Belt, One Road project of China. We've looked at other projects here in Asia, and we've looked at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and the Greater Eurasian Partnership arrangement. And speaking about the tools, I would like to say that the Greater Eurasian Partnership is something that has a lot of future, because the reality and the illusion are giving you the right understanding of what would have happened. Well, for about 30 plus years, we had been listening to consultants and advisors who had been depicting utopian models for us, but in the end, we see that we had to stop being blind and start to see. And the tools we have available to us are multiple. I mean, there's the resource-based nationalism, I've mentioned that one, plus integration is another tool. And here we go. I've given you the results of Kyrgyzstan, a small nation. In summary, let me say that the projects that we are involved in are quite real, and the Eurasian Economic Union is very real, it's very tangible, you can touch it. The projects for interfacing Eurasian integration projects with the Belt Road Initiative, together with the rates of development of our cooperation with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and with BRICS, they allow us to say that we've moved away from the illusory and have moved on to reality. So let's go to this tangible reality. And I hope that the experts community, including those that are doing research and hands-on tools, working as part of secretariats and working groups and other groups, they can reach compromises and find solutions for beneficial use of research. In essence, we can say we can and we should set very tangible goals, such as the Greater Eurasian Partnership. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Wakimov. What you mentioned about decolonization is quite important. This is something that is being discussed quite broadly, although in a different context. You've used this example of your resources quite aptly. I think the history repeats itself. In 1962, a resolution was adopted on nation sovereignty, on their own resources, which had been counted by the gold billion countries, because that had been the foundation of their economic development prior to the mid-20th century, using concessions and then outright exploitation of the mineral reaches of other countries for their own development. Now we are observing the neocolonialism under different guises, and not every country can stand up, as was the case with Kyrgyzstan when they've managed to overcome this dependence on other nations. I think that is something that allowed them to make progress, as was done back in 1962 after the OPEC cartel was established, allowing countries to make use of their resources according to their own liking. And this greater Eurasian partnership can be the foundation and the backbone of this interaction, helping to strengthen the relationship between the countries in opposition to external players. Today we have mentioned many large countries such as Russia and India, but of course India was mentioned several times as one of the key partners that has a significant influence on how the Eurasian partnership is going to evolve going forward. And joining us online today is Mr. Sanjay Joshi, chairman of one of the key think tanks in India and in the world, Observer Research Foundation. He is a very renowned expert and indeed an individual whose opinion has been heeded and who's listened to outside of India. Mr. Joshi, you have the floor. We're really delighted to see you, and hopefully next time you'll be able to come here in person. And we really look forward to that happening. Thank you.
Yes, now yes. Perfect. Спасибо, господин Джоши.
Thank you, Mr. Joshi. We need to strengthen all aspects of our cooperation without a doubt, as far as I know. It's in our case where we have a volume of 35 billion, we need to we said a year ago that we need to reach 30 billion. That's what our leaders discussed. And it is important that these achievements are sustainable and were not driven by the geopolitical, geoeconomic situation. It is clear that we need to operate driven by our common interest and to find the right balance that would be driving forward Eurasia's sustainable development. And only if we have this understanding that we are the owners, that we have the ownership of our own fate, our destiny on this greater Eurasian space, and that we are independent and sovereign in making our decisions, all of the countries, and not under the influence of other countries such as the former hegemons and the countries that are part of the gold billion that have those tools. This independence, this autonomy, and taking into account mutual interest would be the guarantees for stable development of the Greater Eurasia and all of the states that are part of it, be that large states, smaller states, and medium states. Once again, thank you very much. And now, please allow me to give the floor to Glenn Disson, a professor at the University of South East Norway, a political scientist. He's known as a frequent commentator on RT. He specializes in Russian foreign policy. He's a member of the Valdai Discussion Club. And in previous years, he was, prior to the pandemic, he was also a professor at the Higher School of Economics here. Mr. Disson, you have the floor.
Спасибо большое, господин Десен. Благодарим за выступление.
Thank you, Ms. Dr. Deason. On the one hand, we've had a good discussion. We heard speakers who represent most part of the greater Eurasian partnership. We are very much behind all the time limits, exceeded the time limits by 45 minutes, and there is no... I call on the speakers. Perhaps we could invite you to lunch and to the regret of online speakers. Hopefully you'll be able to have lunch together with us and join us and have informal discussions outside the session, which is no less important than plenary sessions or round tables. So looking forward to seeing you here. Next year we'll have the anniversary 25th conference. And today's session shows it's an important topic, and hopefully we will need more time to have discussions. And we'll be able to get together and discuss not only the images and visions of the future, and perhaps with some recipes and tools, and share what has been done, to share this information from our ministries, colleagues, whether it was useful what was said today, and whether it was useful in actual work, and see where we move forward and how we work together for the common good. Thank you very much again. If we could get together for the photo opportunity and for the protocol picture, and invite everybody to lunch. And thank you very much for your presentations, to all of you, particularly to our online speakers, and till we meet again in Russia, at least next year conference. Thank you.